Welcome back, everybody, to the PFN Dallas Cowboys Podcast. I'm Jess Nevarez here alongside Dalton Miller, who has a lot going on at the moment, but not enough that's going to stop him from being on this podcast and venting with us today. Dalton, sir, how are you feeling? First of all, let's start there.
I need to take some responsibility for what happened on Sunday. During our last podcast, if you guys remember, I said that there were no matchups to watch and that this is a game that we didn't need to worry about. We even talked about trap games not being a thing. Well, we screwed that up. It turns out trap games are a very real thing, and the Cowboys found that out when they decided not to show up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, we will give the Arizona Cardinals their credit, the credit that they are due in this podcast as well. But we are going to spend most of our time talking about the sore spots that we saw from the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday, of which there were many.
You know, we love that you take responsibility for that, because let me tell you guys, when I first saw Dalton, our Monday morning meeting, that's the first thing I told him. It was the first thing I told him. So we love being held accountable here. But yeah, there's a lot to learn from. I still don't think it was a trap game. I think there was a series of events that led to the loss, and we'll get into that. But I don't like the phrase trap game, and that does not change even with Sunday's loss to the Arizona Cardinals, 28-16. Dalton, if you look at some of these stats, you would be amazed, a week ago to tell me that that was the Arizona Cardinals coming out of that game with those stats. Insane. I don't even know where we start. Let's start with some injury reports first, only because, again, this was a game that I think was a lot of a product of injuries. When you're missing 3 of your starting offensive linemen, 2 of which making their first NFL start, it's not going to go as smooth as you would like it to go. However, Mike McCarthy in his press conference on Monday had no updates, no injury updates yet. He said not until Wednesday. So keeping a very close eye on Tyler Biotish, the center, who was dealing with a hamstring issue. It was really interesting and random because Aisha Morrison, my co-host on Girls Talk Boys Talk, talked to him in the locker room after practice that day. And she said, "You good?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I feel good." And sure enough, he ends up becoming more of a game time decision and didn't start the game, which is concerning for a lot of reasons, because given the importance of that center position, you need a good center for the communication. It's going to trickle down the line. Also keeping a very close eye on Zach Martin, obviously. Zach Martin continuing to deal with multiple injuries as this season has continued on. We'll get into that. Tyler Smith making his return, so we expect to see more of him as the week continues on. Hopefully he didn't have any setbacks within the game. Tyron Smith also out. That was, I think, the last-minute ultimate game-time decision for him, because he was even dressed out. So I thought that was a little interesting as well. So, Dalton, let's start there. O-line, not healthy. This is a big problem, only because it's so early in the season still, and you're seeing all these injuries pop up, especially within that line. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, how do you handle that situation? Are the backups in Brock Hoffman, Chuma Edoga, and TJ Bass, how did they perform according to what you saw on Sunday?
Well, I didn't think that the interior was all that bad. I thought Chuma had a really difficult game, and I thought that just overall Jonathan Gannon and that defense had a really good game plan against the Dallas Cowboys offense. And I don't think that the offense was terrible. The problems definitely came not between the 20s, but when we got into and past the 20-yard line, which, again, we will get into the red zone offense here in a little bit. But I think that overall the offense really kind of surprised me with how well it operated for the most part. Like I said, the red zone was bad, but I wasn't too upset with what I saw on the offensive line. I just thought that Gannon and that defense had a really good game plan. I thought that they kind of confused the Cowboys a couple times. Thought that the communication on the offensive line, when you are starting 3 different offensive linemen, the offensive line is so much about continuity. And when you're missing 3 of those guys, it is going to have an effect, no matter how good those backups would be. But at the end of the day, this is something that we could have figured out in the offseason, because we knew right away that Tyron Smith was not going to be healthy for the entire season. We know that he was going to miss a game somewhere, multiple games, most likely, because he hadn't played more than 13 games since 2016, and he hadn't played 13 games in the past 2 years. So I think that this is something that should have been taken care of a little bit better in the offseason. But outside of that, I felt like the offseason was good enough that we didn't really have to nitpick all that much.
I also want to give credit to Dak Prescott because although the one interception is going to outshine what he did during this
Yeah.
game could have been a lot worse if Dak wasn't playing like he was. And I'm talking most quarterbacks, you put a Daniel Jones in there, he's getting multiple interceptions, multiple fumbles, multiple more sacks. You know, obviously there was a couple sacks there. However, Dak's ball security during this game is not to go unnoted because without that, this game would have been a lot worse. I mean, and I really don't want that interception to outshine that. That interception, it was interesting to hear him talking about it because he said that he was trying to put it over the defender's ear. Timing wasn't there, and it just didn't happen for them. But the thing is I can't even fault Dak Prescott for that because one, you knew an interception was coming at some point. That's just the nature of being a quarterback. That's just how this thing works, right? Unfortunately for Dak, the timing was not great, and we have to hear the whole interception conversation once again, which I'm just so tired of. But the thing is you go back to even the red zone issues, and like you said, we'll talk about it. What I think shot themselves in the foot is putting themselves in third and long situations to even struggle to get into the red zone at times. And then they're in the red zone, and then you have another third and long. You have a third and 21 because of penalties. It was just a domino effect of them continuing to put self-inflicted wounds on themselves. So yeah, I can't blame Dak for that one. They shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with because the game should have gone a lot better, especially in that first half. Nobody had a rhythm. Absolutely nobody on any side of the ball looked ready for that first half.
No, it was pretty ugly. And going back to the offensive line quickly, there were obviously a lot of holdings, things of that nature. They were trying not to get Dak Prescott killed. And, I do want to give Dak Prescott a lot of credit for his ball security because there were multiple times where he could have fumbled the football. In that game, he was only sacked twice in the game, and I think that just kind of goes to show the offense is getting the ball out of his hands a little bit quicker, just generally. And he, as a 8-year NFL vet, is really gotten out of the habit of taking bad sacks or taking unnecessary sacks when he doesn't have to. So I thought that he did a good job there. I didn't mind the interception all that much. I know that it looks really ugly, but especially when you watch from the end zone angle, he had the throw there. He just needs to throw that up at the uprights and not allow that second level defender to get there, make it to where only his guy is going to be able to get it. And that's a really difficult throw no matter what, because you have those two safeties crunching in on him as well. You don't know if he's going to be able to finish that catch or not, but you do have to keep that ball out of harm's way. I thought overall he played pretty well, but I did think that there were ball placement issues sometimes, especially under pressure. And that's just something that's going to happen naturally when you are under pressure like that. I thought that he could have been a little bit cleaner from time to time, but in that situation, in that environment, and with an offense that, in my opinion, is starting to rely too heavily on CeeDee Lamb, especially on third downs, it was a good performance from Dak Prescott overall, and I don't want that to be lost because of the interception. You're right.
Absolutely. And, something that was interesting was this was a very uncharacteristic game, especially for the Dallas defense. And, we'll talk about that in general. But what I thought was weird was the amount of penalties. And this is because this was an issue last year, right? This was something that the Cowboys were getting grilled on. At the middle of the season was, hey, pre-snap penalties too much. Terrence Steele, Tyler Smith, what is going on, especially with these two guys? They honed in on it. They fixed it. The penalties got back down to a minimum. And then you see just all of the penalties on every side of the ball, and some were so killer. Anytime the Cowboys would try to get momentum, penalty, and then you're put right back. I mean, Devin Harper there with the penalty that he got drawn on him with Kevontae Turpin's run. I mean, that was nail in the coffin, really, when you look at it. But I wanted to look into the penalties a little bit because, again, 13 in a game, that is crazy. And 13 for 107 yards. That is you're not going to win a game when you're that behind in penalties. And interestingly enough, 13 penalties was the amount of penalties that the Cowboys had in week 12 last year against the New York Giants. And that was the most penalties that they had within a game last season. So if it gives you a bright spot, hopefully this is the same situation for the Cowboys this season. I looked into the officiating crew because I wanted to see how many penalties typically that they will throw in a game or that they've thrown so far this season under the same officiating crew that was working the Cowboys game, right?
A
So
lot.
this same crew through, let's see, week 1, it was Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Penalty yards 145 for 17 total penalties. Week 2, Detroit versus Seattle, 13 total penalties for 104 yards. And then you get to week 3 in Arizona against the Cowboys, 21 total penalties for 176 yards. So even for an officiating crew that's a little flag happy, if you will, week to week, this was even a spike for that crew because, again, the Cowboys just were not playing disciplined. And what gets me, Dalton, what gets me is if you know that you have an officiating crew that's a little bit quick to draw the flag, you have to play smarter than that and you have to be one step ahead of it.
Yeah, and it's an officiating crew, and I can't remember where I saw this on Twitter. I would love to give credit where credit is due here, but I can't remember who said it. But they said that the officiating crew also it throws more penalty flags for the away team than they do the home team on a normal basis, that crew specifically. So, yeah, we knew what we were going to get there, and the Cowboys just have to do a better job. They have to play a cleaner brand of football, and that goes beyond the penalties as well, which we're going to get to with this run defense, I think, right now, right?
Right now, Dalton is bursting at the seams here to talk about this run defense. Sir, what is your hot or not take for the week? Let's start there. And then we'll work our way back with this run defense. Dalton Miller's
Yes.
hot or not take of the week is...
Well, it goes along with the run defense. The Dallas Cowboys need to play Marquise Bell and Wanye Thomas more, and they need to play Dono less. And that doesn't mean that that's going to happen for the entire season, but that's what needs to happen right now because Donovan Wilson did not play in training camp. Donovan Wilson did not play in the preseason. Donovan Wilson did not play the first 2 weeks of the season. And then they went out and they played him on 52% of the defensive snaps. And against the run, he was a complete liability at the second level. This is not something that we are used to seeing from Donovan Wilson. He is a fantastic playmaker at the second and third level, especially when it comes to his ability to defend against the run. But he was lost in the sauce against the Arizona Cardinals this past week. And I mean, it just really comes down to not playing all that much so far this year. So let's figure that out. Let's get those guys worked in. Let's bring Dono back a little bit slower until he is ready to take on that responsibility again.
Absolutely. And it's not because Dono's not an impact player, right? It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, like you said, he got injured the first day of training camp in Oxnard. That was back at the end of July. Dono has not seen a snap of football really fully until this last week when he was getting more reps at practice. And then again, the ramp up phase, and that's why it's there. So guys don't get injured. But I don't understand why, when you have guys like Wanye Thomas and Marquise Bell, who have been so effective, why they're not getting more snaps in this game. The ball distribution was weird. And I just don't feel like they knew how to handle what Arizona was doing. And here's the thing. A lot of people overlooked Arizona. I don't necessarily think the Cowboys did. I think the fans did. I think all of us did. We did. But I think Dan Quinn was smarter to know that. Again, this is a very Philly style defense when you look at the history and the ties there. So obviously they are going to have glimmers of being good. It's just when they lose their playmaker in Budda Baker, you don't really know what to expect. And that goes around the league when you have a big player that goes down on any team, right? But no, I agree. I think Dono will find his footing. It's going to take a little bit. I think come December football, Dono is going to be Dono once again, but he has to work his way back into it and he has to ease back into it as well. So interesting there. Dalton, I wanted to ask you, this run defense. Again, we're talking about this. It feels like a Twilight Zone flashback to the 2022 season. And this game felt like everything that was wrong with the Dallas Cowboys last year came back to haunt them, and it came back tenfold. with a run defense, has obviously Josh Dobbs going to be a little bit more mobile of a quarterback than you've seen in the last couple of weeks. What what was the problem? Where did it start? What was the first domino that fell? And then how did it progress to be what it was with, I mean, really the Cardinals offense running all over the defense? You're talking, let's see, over 200 rushing yards in this game. Josh Dobbs all over the place. I mean, everybody was running. Everyone was running. What started it? How did it end up where it was?
Yeah, this is something that shouldn't, and I'm so mad that I didn't figure this out beforehand. But I think that we need to look at what we saw from their run game to see what we should have figured out. Like it's the Cowboys, because of their athleticism, because of their speed, are going to be menaces against zone rushing attacks. But they need to be able to also hold up against power runs, pulling guards, pulling tackles, guys getting out onto the edge and moving. That's something that we did not see against this football team, against the Arizona Cardinals. And that is what really killed them. That's what killed them against teams like the San Francisco 49ers in the past as well. They don't necessarily have the type of physicality or the type of gap responsibility. That they're such an aggressive attacking defense that they get themselves out of position a lot of times. And they also have a ton of trouble defending against read option with mobile quarterbacks and with sift blocks and sniffers. So what that means for anybody that doesn't know is that kind of H-back that plays, behind where a tight end would normally play, that blocks across the formation behind. When things like that happen, they have a really big struggle with dealing with those types of misdirections, those types of blocks, and being in the right gap at the right time. So that's what we saw in this game particularly. You saw that James Conner runs really hard. He's not easy to tackle. This is the first game that we really saw some tackling issues from the Dallas Cowboys, but it was mostly an issue with responsibility in their run fits.
I also want to point out, too, that in the first 2 weeks of the season, the Cowboys missed a total of 4 tackles on their defense. Going into this game, that sounds great, but then you go into this game, they missed a total of 6. So even though tackling was an issue, I think it was an issue on big plays. And that's why it looked like more of an issue than what it was, because they were giving up those big runs and those big plays. So their tackling was still, it's not horrible, right? To miss 6 tackles in a game, that's not bad. But Dan Quinn said that's not enough. That we need to get that down to 0. If it's up to me, we don't want any. So Dan Quinn was very quick to say that 6 missed tackles in a game is too many for them. And it's because, again, of those explosive plays that were happening. What was interesting is, so before every Dan Quinn press conference, he does a little speech. He doesn't answer questions first. He does a little speech of what is on his mind, and then he opens up for questions. He opened up this week and he said something that bothered him the most and felt like a slap in the face was people saying, you didn't look like your defense. And he said, not because they said it, it's because it was true. We didn't uphold our standards that we've set for ourselves all this entire time, not just the first 2 weeks, but even going back to before the season started. So Dan Quinn and the rest of the coaching staff took accountability for their faults in this game. They knew exactly where their coaching wasn't to the standards that it needed to be, and they knew where the weak spots were for their part of the loss. So I have no doubt that it's going to be something that Dan Quinn fixes, because, again, he even described this as something that hurt him. And for a coach to come out and say that, he's upset. He's not taking it lightly. So, yeah, tackling wasn't the best, but it also wasn't the worst. It's just, again, uncharacteristic, not up to their standards. So I think that's the best way to describe that there. Dalton, I want to ask you, because Micah Parsons, usually a big threat in these games, he is your playmaker. He is your everything, really, when it comes to the defense. He's your Thanos of the defense. What happened? How were the Cardinals able to kind of neutralize Micah Parsons in this game and make him less impactful. And it almost looked like he was flustered. How were they able to do that? What did they hone in on him this week?
Yeah, they kind of beat him up. He was on the ground a lot in this game. He not just running into blockers, but there were a couple times where DeMarcus Lawrence ran into him. He was a little bit slow to get up, and it just looked like he was getting banged up a little bit. And I want to talk about him being neutralized, but he still had 5 pressures and a sack in this game, so he still left his mark. But yes, I thought that there were a couple times. There was one time where he was chasing down Josh Dobbs, and Josh Dobbs actually picked up a couple yards, and I couldn't believe it because Micah Parsons is somebody who absolutely deletes space, and he just did not delete that space against Dobbs, and that was a little bit concerning to me. And it makes a little bit of sense because he played more snaps in this game than he had in any of the first 2 games, and he was probably just a little bit more tired than he is used to being. I think that the rotation, because they were playing from down a little bit, they wanted to get him a couple of more snaps just overall. And he just played a little bit slower because of it. And I think when you have somebody like Micah Parsons, obviously the power output that he has at his size is ridiculous. But his real trump card is his speed, is that explosiveness that he possesses. And it's a lot like Tony Pollard in the same respect as you would really like to see those guys be at 100% and have the type of energy to go out and be as explosive as humanly possible. When you play that many snaps on the edge as a 250-pound human being, you're just not going to be able to hold up, down in, and down out for an entire game like that. So I think you played him a lot of snaps. He got beat up by his own teammates, by the opponents as well. And that's kind of how it got slowed down from what we're used to seeing, the impact that we're used to seeing from him.
Does it concern you at all? Because I remember last season that the Titans game, ironically enough, against Josh Dobbs again, kind of became the blueprint for figuring out this Dallas Cowboys defense kryptonite, which was the run defense and which was the RPO. Do you feel like this was a blueprint game or just a very uncharacteristic game that people can't use against them later? Because that's a concern going forward, right? So how do you feel about that? Do you feel like people can tap into this and look at what happened and say, that's how we figure this defense out? Or is it uncharacteristic enough to where you can't really feel confident in that being good tape?
The RPOs are an issue. The RPOs are an issue. The power run game is an issue. The normal traditional drop back game, we're going to tee off on teams. The coverage guys are too good, but schematically, we need to figure out, Dan Quinn needs to figure out how he wants to defend RPOs, because what they are doing right now is not going to continue. It's going to continue not to work against RPOs. There were far too many easy looks from Josh Dobbs or for Josh Dobbs in this game. And he went 17 of 21, completed over 80% of his passes, and I think 2 of those were drops. So it's not like he had a very difficult time out there. And you don't want to make a guy who has been a career jobber look like that on a Sunday when you are supposed to be the best defense in the NFL. So, yes, they need to figure out the RPO issue. They need to figure out the power run game issue. They need to just play more within themselves and more when it comes to the RPOs, figure out schematically how they want to defend them.
And I hate to harp on the penalties, right? I really do. Penalties irk me. I think you're going to have some that are drawn when you're trying to be aggressive. And Dan Quinn talked about that yesterday. I asked him, what about the penalties was your message? And he said, look, we're going to push that line as far as we can to be aggressive. And that's fine. He said, when you're defending and you're pushing that line, I'm okay with those. I can live with those. The issue is the pre-snap penalties, because again, that goes to show just how frazzled they were, and it let that mindset that they had previously had the last couple of weeks of, we're not trying to chase big plays, we're going to allow them to happen. That mindset wasn't there during this game, and I think that's dangerous when you're talking about a team with this much talent and this much potential based on what you've already seen and is there. It's a dangerous game to be playing when they're trying to make things happen, that it just becomes so undisciplined that you're drawing penalties pre-snap. I mean, that's unacceptable. So he said he has no doubt that that's going to go back to where it needs to be this week, because he was irked about that as well. Something I wanted to ask you, and this Cowboys team coming off of a very difficult week full of oh my goodness, I can't even talk, adversities, um, and full of, just very unfortunate timing issues and injuries. Obviously, the biggest one being Trayvon Diggs and the season-ending ACL injury that occurred in practice on a Thursday, right? That doesn't give your team really much time to figure things out in that way. And then you go into Saturday, and then half of your O line is questionable. A lot went on during the week for them, and that's not an excuse. That's just the reality of what happened for them going into this game. I want to go back to Trayvon Diggs. Was this a product of him not being on the field? Well, I mean, is this something that you're going to have to worry about going forward with this team because he's not going to be able to return this season? Um, I understand he's a playmaker, but I feel like there was a lot more going on with this game than just him.
Yeah,
However,
yeah.
what are you missing in this game? What happens if Trayvon Diggs is in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the RPO defense is a little bit better because you're gonna have a guy who is a playmaker, especially when playing off in cover one. He is incredible. The click and close that he has, he's able to close down on those throwing windows and get his hands in there and break up those slants on the RPOs and those quick outs on the RPOs because he is so aggressive. I think that the injury happening on Thursday really hurts because you're putting your game plan in that entire week. You're figuring out what you're going to do defensively, and then you lose, your best corner or arguably your best corner because, Stefan Gilmore is really, really good. And I know that he has a game that he wants back. Then from this past week, he struggled a little bit against Hollywood Brown, especially. But I think, at the end of the day, this is a defense that has talent at all three levels. It's one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. They already have one very, very good corner, and they only had one very good corner last year, and CB2 was an issue for them last year. And I think that Deron Bland on the outside and Jordan Lewis on the inside is better than what you had a season ago, especially when you add Stefan Gilmore to the fold. So I think they can be okay. I think because of the timing of the injury, it was really tough for them to overcome it.
Just an emotional week following that Trayvon Diggs injury for them. And Dan Quinn, we hadn't got to talk to him since before the injury had happened, since last Monday. And so, Dan finally got to talk about it. And he said that when it happened, people were texting him, next man up, next man up. And he said, what bothered him the most was, yeah, in a football aspect and football mind, sure, that's what it is. He said, but those people weren't sitting there in the room with me, with this player who was obviously really upset. And he said, my concern in that moment was Trey as a person. It wasn't next man up or anything. He said, seeing his reaction to knowing his season was over on probably his best season yet as a young player was where Dan's focus was. And so to have to come back from bouncing back from that, coach this team, figure things out. I mean, it was just an emotional week really for everybody. And that injury impacted all of them. That's their friend, that's their brother, and it's Trayvon Diggs. That's your playmaker. That's a big playmaker to lose this early in the season, to understand that he was absorbing too what this defense is capable of doing and what they're capable of accomplishing, and you're not going to be part of that. That's hard. And so for Dan to talk about that, I thought was also really important during his press conference. We just hadn't heard from him yet, and so that was a moment for him as well. But something else I want to talk about is special teams. Shout out to Brandon Aubrey. Thank you, Brandon Aubrey, for the points on the board that kept the Cowboys from making this a single point game for them. 15 consecutive kicks since his missed kick in week 1. And
PFN VP.
Yeah, I mean, really, Brandon Aubrey continues to impress. And John Fossil talked about it in his press conference yesterday, saying he just has never lost the same confidence. He's always had the same amount of confidence, whether people did in him or not, starting from when he got there. So big shout out to Brandon Aubrey as well. Real quick, before we jump into our New England matchups, Dalton, who is your PFN BP? Is it Brandon Aubrey? You going Aubrey for the week?
Yep, we're going Aubrey for the week.
You're going Aubrey for the week, period, point blank. I'm going Michael Gallup. I am going
Fair.
Michael Gallup. It is so nice to see him back again because, look, here's the thing. Arizona defense didn't expect Michael Gallup to reappear. I mean, he hasn't been given any opportunities the past 2 weeks. Why would this week be different? They were too busy defending CD, the tight ends. They forgot what a threat Michael Gallup can be when you get him that ball. I just wish, oh man, I just wish he would have gotten that touchdown. I don't know how that flag was drawn back. I'm not an NFL ref, so I guess it's not my decision to make, but it was a very good play, very good fight by Michael Gallup. That's one thing I did notice about him is, not everybody on the team was fighting to finish the play. Michael Gallup was, and I just appreciate him for that. So shout out to Michael Gallup for being my PF MVP for the week. Dalton, week 4, we're turning the page. We're going to forget that this happened. We're going to learn, and we're going to grow as people, and we're not going to say there's never matchups here on the podcast again. We will own our lack of, I guess, what do you want to call that? Our lack of fear for this team?
Yeah, care.
Anything.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
Yeah.
That was a mistake. It was bad karma. It was bad karma. It was bad juju. It shouldn't have happened. We talked a lot about the Jets game. We were getting pushed up against it. I would like to say that it wasn't a calculated decision, but it was. We decided beforehand not to talk about the Cardinals, and that was a mistake. That was pushing our luck.
It was both of us. So we're both taking responsibility.
Yeah, but it was
here.
really me. It was really me.
It was both of us. Look, we go down together. No, we go down together. We go down together. Karma was not our boyfriend. Karma was not a cat. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. That is the only thing that kept me sane throughout the weekend with this Cowboys loss. However, week 4, going to be quite a fun matchup for the Dallas Cowboys as they take on the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick. And that's going to be an interesting one because Dak and Belichick, that history there, this is a fun one to unpack. I always like Belichick games. And talking about an Ezekiel Elliott homecoming, which we didn't even get to talk about previously with the red zone issues. So, Dalton, let's start. What are your key matchups for week 4 against the Patriots?
Yeah, the Cowboys edges against Vidarian Lowe, who is playing right tackle right now for the New England Patriots. I think that's really the one that I am circling because they need to affect Mac Jones. Bill O'Brien does a lot of nice things offensively. He's going to try his best to get the ball out of Jones' hands as quickly as possible. Try to get it to, I would like to say playmakers. They're not really playmakers. But guys like Juju, Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker is going to get work along the sidelines and down the field. And they do like to push the ball downfield every once in a while as well. So the Cowboys have to be ready for that. But I think that the Cowboys have a very big advantage on the defensive line compared to the New England Patriots offensive line. They obviously need to run defend better. But I think that the Vidarian Lowe matchup against Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be huge. I think, the other one is the Patriots. And it's not just one player with them. Obviously, Matthew Judon is insanely good. Josh Uche, who is kind of a designated pass rusher, he only plays about 20, 25 snaps a game, is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He just doesn't play a lot. His explosiveness, the power he's able to create out of a somewhat smaller frame is not too unlike Micah Parsons. He's not the player that Micah Parsons is, but they have that similar type of violence in their game for smaller guys that is very surprising. And he is a very good pass rusher. So against a banged up offensive line and a defense that is incredibly well coached and very tough to kind of nail down what they are doing on a snap by snap basis, I think is going to be important. And that leads into the last matchup, which is Dak Prescott against Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, one of, if not the greatest defensive mind in the NFL. And in NFL history, for that matter. Obviously, his friendship with Nick Saban is well documented. 2 of the best defensive minds ever, and I'm sure that when they speak all of the time in the offseason, they are talking about ball and how to improve defensively. And he has, a little bit of talent on the defensive side of the ball. He wakes up with a top 5 unit. But when you get guys like Christian Gonzalez to somehow fall to you in the NFL draft, a true legitimate shutdown corner on the outside playing very well as a rookie, and then to have playmakers like Kyle Duggar on the back end playing safety for them. Adrian Phillips is a fantastic safety. They have a couple of smash mouth linebackers as well, and they do a really good job creating pressure with those linebackers. So it's going to be fun to watch Dak and this inexperienced or potentially inexperienced offensive line deal with the different looks that Bill Belichick is going to throw at them.
Well, there you go. Dalton Miller coming in clutch with your key matchups. Something I'm looking for, the red zone. And I think the Cowboys offense is going to be looking for it as well, and to score.
Oh, they found the red zone. They found the red zone a lot. They just haven't found the end zone a lot from the red zone.
You gotta find the end zone and the red zone, you know? Something that's interesting is I knew this would come up. I just knew this was going to come up if the Cowboys cannot be productive in the red zone, because guess who you're missing? Ezekiel Elliott, who was number 1 in the red zone across the league last season. Ironically enough, when the Patriots grabbed him or were even just working him out, I looked into this because they were ranked last in scoring in the red zone last season. As of right now, this week, going into week 4, they're 7th in the NFL for red zone production. Not that Zeke has a touchdown yet. He doesn't. However, when you have a guy in the red zone like Ezekiel Elliott that is pushing for those yards and continuing to drive you towards the end zone, it helps you a lot. And so it's, for me, my matchup, red zone versus red zone. Who is going to score more? Because the Cowboys, one, need to break out of this mindset of not scoring in the red zone. You're going into week 4 of the season, and not one receiver has a touchdown for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
It's been all tight ends, all running backs. Where's your receivers? Need to see them in the end zone. That's where they should be. And then the Patriots, if the Cowboys defense can hold them back, keep them in 3rd and long situations, not allow them to have explosive plays, especially in the red zone, they can absolutely come out of this game, win, and then again start to improve from the downfall that they had in week 3.
Yeah, if you guys really want your blood pressure to rise, it's a small sample size. Obviously, it's only been 3 games, but look at the Chargers red zone offense compared to the Dallas Cowboys red zone offense. Look at the Chargers red zone offense last year, and then look at it this year. Look at the Cowboys red zone offense last year, and then look at it this year. If you guys want your blood pressure raised, check that one out. I think we can get on to game predictions here, can't we? We haven't really done like legitimate game predictions, like score predictions so far this year. This is obviously something that we need to do every single week because the people are here because they want to hear if we think that the Dallas Cowboys are going to win and how badly they're going to win.
Don't start that again, Dalton. Don't start it again. We have trust issues now. Our people have trust issues with us. We have to ease them back in slowly. We can get into game predictions. What are some of the game predictions you have, whether it be score, playmakers, any of that? Some good, bold takes. What are they?
I think CD is going to get a touchdown against Christian Gonzalez this week. I think that's the first wide receiver touchdown that we get. I do think it comes from outside of the 20-yard line, though.
That's a good one. All right. People might not like my game prediction. Ezekiel Elliott's getting his first touchdown as a New England Patriot this week at AT&T Stadium. He hasn't had one yet, and what better time than to get it when you are at your revenge game against your former team. So that's my game prediction. And look, I wouldn't hate it. Get one touchdown, and then that's it. We don't need to see.
I'm fine with it. Game. Yeah, I like that. Ezekiel Elliott scores a touchdown, and the Dallas Cowboys win 24-17. Let's go.
24-17. Oh man, I do think it will be a low scoring game. I'm gonna say, let's see. I'm gonna go 15 for the Patriots, and I'm gonna say, let's see, 21 for the Cowboys. Okay. I'm gonna go 15-21. Yeah, 21. See what I did there? Look. Yeah.
Hilarious.
I know.
It never stops. It stops.
It doesn't. It just comes natural in my DNA at this point. That's my game prediction. As for the Dallas Cowboys, look, you need to get Deuce Vaughn more involved. I hope to see Deuce in the end zone. He's not a receiver, but if Deuce can get in the end zone, they need to start building who that red zone guy is for them. They really do. They need to figure out who fills that hole for Zeke. If it's Deuce, I think you got some juice with that. I really do. I
Well,
think he could be a good guy in there. And
if I could bring up one point real quick, there
bring it
should have
up.
been a touchdown in the red zone from one Dakota Prescott. For some reason, he did not keep a read option. That was a very, very clear keep read. It's something that you are taught as a junior high quarterback. So I wonder if he was locked there or if he had the option and he just missed the read. But that was a little bit concerning because Dak was good on his legs against the Arizona Cardinals. He really made some plays when he had to. He looked like he had a little bit more juice than we are used to seeing from him now. But Dak, you got to keep the ball there in the red zone. You are one of the best red zone weapons in the NFL historically when you run the ball in that area. So please keep it and put those big legs in the end zone.
And he acknowledged that. He did acknowledge after the game when he spoke that he needed to use his legs more. He took accountability for his part. So we love an accountable king here on the podcast. We really do. I am glad to see Dak a little more mobile as well. So good point. Excellent stuff there. Dalton, where can the people find you if they feel like tweeting you how amazing your hot or not takes are of the week?
You can find me on Twitter at Dalton B. Miller.
There you go. Dalton B. Miller. I'm at Jess Nevarez _. If you feel like tweeting me anything else about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, I'm all about it. That is all my social media has been lately. And I love it. But Dalton, we have unfortunately come to the end of our podcast here. Thank you guys so much for listening each and every week. Make sure to go rate us wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us all 5 stars because Cowboys fans obviously are the best, and they do that anyways. If you're an Eagles fan, please give us 5 stars anyways because you're obviously a fan if you're listening, so we love that for you. Don't love your team, but that's okay. Dalton, thank you. We love the accountability here today. We've learned, we've grown together on this podcast. We're going to continue to do great. We'll talk all about the Dallas Cowboys Week 4 matchup against the Patriots next week here on the Dallas Cowboys PFN podcast. Until then, have a great day and go Cowboys.